Chosen one before anything else, you need to understand this. This moment is not accidental, and it is not dramatic coincidence designed to impress you. It is timing. And timing is never emotional. Timing is precise. Messages like this don't reach people who are merely curious. They reach people who are ready. Ready does not mean excited. Ready does not mean confident. Ready often looks like exhaustion, confusion, or the quiet feeling that something has shifted. But you can't fully explain what. That inner change is the signal. Here is what most people misunderstand. Chosen ones are not selected first and tested later. They are tested first, quietly, privately, without explanation. And only after the test do they receive confirmation. If you had received validation earlier, it would have interfered with the integrity of the test. On it, you would have acted differently. You might have performed. You might have expected reward. You might have altered your behavior to match an identity instead of revealing who you truly were. That is why confirmation always comes after the pressure. This message is finding you now because something inside you has already crossed a line. You are no longer the person you were during your earlier struggles, but you are not yet fully aligned with who you are becoming. That in-between state is uncomfortable. It creates questions without clear answers. It makes old motivations feel empty and old fears feel smaller, even if they still exist. And here's the key distinction most people miss. Not everyone who encounters spiritual content is chosen. Many are seeking comfort. Some are seeking escape. Others are seeking identity. But chosen ones recognize themselves not through excitement, through resonance. Something in you doesn't feel hyped right now. It feels recognized, almost like something you forgot has been quietly acknowledged. There is also a reason this message didn't come when things were going well. When life is smooth, identity remains untested. Anyone can believe in purpose when circumstances cooperate. But timing like this usually arrives when the noise has died down, when distractions have failed, when external validation no longer satisfies, when you're left face to face with yourself. This is when real alignment begins. Psychologically, this moment often appears after prolonged internal pressure. The mind has already exhausted old coping mechanisms. Emotionally, you've likely noticed that reactions, which once consumed you, no longer have the same grip. Spiritually, whether you use that word or not, there is a sense of internal gravity pulling you toward clarity, responsibility, and truth. That is why this message found you now and not earlier. Earlier, it would have felt like fantasy. Earlier, it might have fed ego instead of grounding identity. Earlier, it would have distracted you from becoming. Now, it lands differently. And here's something important you need to hear clearly. This message is not here to elevate you above others. It is here to call you inward. Chosen ones are not defined by privilege. They are defined by accountability. The moment you recognize yourself, expectations quietly increase. Not external expectations, but internal ones. You begin to feel less tolerance for dishonesty, less patience for misalignment, less desire to betray your own values just to fit in. That discomfort you've been feeling lately, that's not confusion, that's calibration. So if you're listening to this and thinking, this doesn't feel random, it feels oddly precise, that's because it is. Not because you are special in the way the world defines special, but because you have already demonstrated something the world rarely sees. The ability to remain internally consistent while everything around you demanded collapse. And now that consistency is being acknowledged. This message didn't come to start your journey. It came because you're already on it. Chosen one. What revealed you was not a breakthrough, a miracle, or a moment anyone else could see. It was a decision so small, it barely registered as a decision at all. And that is exactly why it mattered. Most people believe identity is revealed in big moments. When someone stands up publicly, makes a bold declaration, or achieves something impressive. But identity is never proven on a stage. It is proven in isolation, when no reward is visible and no witness is present. What exposed who you really are happened in a moment when you were tired, emotionally depleted, and quietly overwhelmed. You know the moment. It wasn't the worst day of your life. It was worse than that. It was the kind of moment where nothing dramatic happens, yet everything feels heavy. The mind starts negotiating. It begins to justify bitterness, self-pity, or disengagement. Not because you wanted to become negative, but because negativity felt reasonable. That's when most people give themselves permission to harden. But you didn't harden. What you chose wasn't loud faith or confident belief. It was restraint. It was the decision not to poison yourself with resentment. It might have shown up as a single quiet thought. I'll keep going. I still trust. Or even just, help me. It may not have felt strong. It didn't feel victorious. But it was honest. And honesty under pressure is rare. Here's why that decision mattered more than you realize. Under stress, the human nervous system defaults to survival. It seeks control, blame, or emotional release. Anger feels powerful. Withdrawal feels safe. Cynicism feels intelligent. Choosing something higher in that moment requires self-regulation that most people haven't developed yet. That's the part people miss. This wasn't about being positive. It was about being internally disciplined. There's an important distinction you need to understand. Surrender is not resignation. Resignation says, nothing matters anymore. Surrender says, I don't need to understand everything to stay aligned with who I am. What you did was surrender. You didn't collapse into apathy. You didn't demand explanations. You stayed open without becoming fragile. And that decision didn't come from willpower alone. It came from something already built inside you. Small moments like that don't create character. They reveal it. Under enough pressure, whatever is most true in a person rises to the surface. For many, that truth is bitterness they didn't know they were carrying. For you, it was integrity. This is also why you may not have felt proud afterward. Chosen ones rarely do. Pride would have shifted the motive. Instead, there was likely a strange calm, even if the circumstances didn't improve immediately. That calm wasn't relief. It was alignment. When your actions match your deeper values, the nervous system stabilizes, even in chaos. And here's something crucial. That decision didn't make life easier right away. In fact, things may have stayed difficult for a while. But internally, something locked into place. From that point forward, it became harder to lie to yourself. Harder to betray your own standards. Harder to return to who you used to be. That's why this decision revealed who you really are. Not because it was heroic, but because it was consistent. Anyone can choose light when it's convenient. Anyone can say the right words when outcomes are favorable. But when pressure removes comfort, excuses, and external validation, only what's real remains. And what remained in you was clarity, restraint, and trust. That moment didn't change the world around you. It changed the way the world can no longer change you. And once that line is crossed, there is no going back. Chosen one, the reason your life has often felt misunderstood, even by you, is because humans are trained to see moments, not patterns. You experience life one day at a time, one emotion at a time, one success or failure at a time. Angels do not see it that way. They never have. Where humans see isolated events, angels see response sequences. Where humans see randomness, angels see consistency under pressure. Where humans see failure and recovery, angels see direction. This is why your story cannot be evaluated by any single moment. Not your worst day, not your best decision, not even your strongest act of faith. What reveals you is the pattern created when those moments are stacked together over time. Here is the key distinction. Angels do not measure what happens to you. They measure what consistently comes out of you. Pressure is not an interruption to the process. It is the lens that makes the truth visible. Comfort hides identity. Stability masks character. But sustained pressure strips away performance, explanations, and self-image until only your core remains. And what has been revealed in you, again and again, is not perfection. It is direction. You may remember times you stumbled, doubted, or felt lost. Angels remember something else. They see how long it took you to return to center. They see how quickly you corrected your course. They see how often you chose integrity after disruption instead of surrendering to bitterness. That return, repeated over time, forms a pattern few humans ever complete. This is why chosen ones often feel misunderstood or underestimated. From the outside, your life may not look impressive, and it may even look fragmented. But from a higher vantage point, your responses tell a coherent story. Not of someone who never fell, but of someone who refused to stay down emotionally, even when staying down would have been justified. There is also something else angels notice that humans usually miss. Progressive pressure. Most people experience pressure in waves. When things get too difficult, they disengage, numb out, or lower their standards. The pattern breaks. But in your life, the pressure didn't arrive randomly. It increased. Responsibilities grew heavier. Expectations became more complex. Losses cut deeper. And instead of your internal light diminishing, it adapted. It refined. It became quieter but stronger. That is the pattern that stands out. Consistency under increasing pressure is extraordinarily rare. Many people are kind when life is fair. Many are faithful when outcomes are predictable. But very few maintain internal alignment when effort goes unrewarded, when goodness isn't acknowledged, when silence replaces reassurance. You did. Not perfectly, but persistently. This is why angels see your life as a tapestry, not a collection of threads. You see mistakes. They see resilience. You see delays. They see preparation. You see unanswered questions. They see unanswered questions that did not turn into resentment. And here's something important you need to hear. Your value is not located in what you have achieved. It is located in what you consistently refuse to become. You refused to become cruel when cruelty felt justified. You refused to become dishonest when shortcuts were available. You refused to become numb when indifference would have protected you. Those refusals form a pattern, and patterns are what angels respond to. That is why a single quiet decision carried so much weight. Not because it stood alone, but because it confirmed everything that came before it, and it aligned with years of smaller, forgotten choices that pointed in the same direction. The moment wasn't surprising to heaven. It was confirming. You may still question your path because humans crave clarity in real time. Angels don't. They watch trajectories. and your trajectory has already spoken. What you see as a life still unfolding, they see as a pattern already established. And that pattern tells them exactly who you are becoming. Chosen one. When people hear the phrase soul frequency, they often imagine something mystical, abstract, or unreachable. But the truth is much simpler and much more demanding. Soul frequency is not about emotion, mood, or positivity. It is about what governs your inner state when external conditions try to take control. Most people live in what can be called reactive frequency. This means their internal world mirrors whatever is happening around them. When things go well, they feel stable. When things fall apart, their peace collapses with it. Their sense of self rises and falls based on approval, success, or circumstances. This isn't weakness. It's the default human condition. Reactive frequency is efficient. It conserves energy. It avoids internal conflict. And because of that, most people never leave it. Chosen frequency is different. It is not emotional suppression, and it is not constant calm. It is the capacity to remain internally governed by values instead of reactions. In other words, your behavior is no longer dictated by what happens. It is dictated by who you are committed to being. That shift does not happen all at once. It happens slowly, through repeated moments where reaction would have been easier. Here is where your life becomes revealing. At some point, without fully realizing it, you stopped letting every trigger decide your identity. You still felt emotions, frustration, sadness, anger, but you no longer became them. There was a growing pause between stimulus and response. In that pause, choice appeared. That pause is frequency. This is why chosen ones often feel emotionally older than others. It's not because they've suffered more. It's because they've practiced regulation under stress. They've learned, often unconsciously, how to stay present without being overtaken. That ability is extremely rare, and it cannot be taught through theory. It is earned through experience. Here's something important to understand. Frequency is built through consistency, not intensity. A single emotional breakthrough doesn't raise frequency. A single moment of faith doesn't either. What raises frequency is repeatedly choosing alignment when nobody would blame you for choosing otherwise. Over time, those choices rewire your nervous system. Calm becomes more accessible. Clarity arrives faster. Emotional recovery shortens. This is also why chosen ones often confuse peace with emptiness at first. When you stop reacting constantly, life becomes quieter internally. Drama no longer provides stimulation. Chaos no longer feels familiar. That silence can feel unsettling until you realize it's not emptiness. It's stability. Most people never reach this point because reactive frequency feels alive. It feels expressive. It feels justified. Anger feels powerful. Victimhood feels validating. Chaos feels normal. Leaving reactivity behind can feel like losing intensity. But what you're actually losing is noise. And here is the truth. Few people say out loud. Reactive people are easy to influence. Regulated people are not. Once your inner state becomes self-governed, manipulation loses power. Emotional hooks don't land the same way. External chaos no longer dictates your decisions. That is why higher frequency always attracts resistance. Not because it is aggressive, but because it is independent. This is also why chosen ones often experience a strange reversal. As their inner peace increases, their outer life may temporarily destabilize. Old environments, in relationships and roles that depended on your reactivity, can no longer function the same way. They begin to fall away. not as punishment, but as incompatibility. Soul frequency, then, is not about floating above life. It is about staying grounded while life shakes. And the reason angels pay attention to this is simple. Anyone can behave well when circumstances cooperate. Very few can stay aligned when they don't. That ability marks the transition from reaction to authorship, from being shaped by life to actively shaping how life moves through you. And once that transition is made, there is no returning to who you were before. Chosen one, being marked is not a moment of celebration. It is a moment of recalibration. This is where many misunderstand what divine favor actually looks like. Favor is not comfort. Favor is clarity. And clarity changes everything. When you are marked, your life doesn't suddenly become easier. It becomes less tolerable to live out of alignment. Things you once accepted, distractions, shallow connections, emotional chaos, dishonest compromises, start to feel heavier than the struggle itself. What used to work no longer works, and that can feel confusing at first. This is because marking does not elevate your status. It elevates your standards. Yes, favor increases. Doors begin to open with less force. Certain obstacles dissolve without the usual fight. Timing improves. Encounters feel more intentional. But at the same time, the margin for self-betrayal shrinks. You feel consequences internally faster when you ignore your intuition. You can't numb yourself the way you once did. The inner discomfort arrives quickly, not to punish you, but to correct you. This is where burden enters the picture. Being marked means you are trusted with more responsibility, not because you are perfect, but because you are regulated. You have demonstrated the ability to carry weight without turning it into bitterness. That makes you reliable in environments where others would fracture, and reliability is rare. But reliability comes with isolation. As your clarity increases, your tolerance for misalignment decreases. Conversations that once felt normal begin to feel draining. Relationships built on chaos, dependency, or emotional volatility lose their pull. This isn't because you think you're better than others. It's because your nervous system no longer resonates with instability. That isolation is not abandonment. It is selection pressure. Marked ones often experience a thinning of their social world. Fewer people, fewer words, fewer explanations. You may find yourself spending more time alone, not because you are lonely, but because solitude becomes necessary for integration. Silence becomes functional. Reflection becomes essential. This phase can be uncomfortable because it strips away external validation. You are no longer constantly affirmed by attention, agreement, or noise. Instead, you are asked to self-validate through alignment. That's why many people misinterpret this season as loss, when in reality, it is refinement. Another important truth. When you are marked, the pace changes. Opportunities accelerate, but so do consequences. Decisions matter more. Timing becomes sharper. You begin to sense when something is off before it fully manifests. This isn't anxiety. It's sensitivity. You are being trained to respond earlier, not louder. And here's what almost no one tells you. Being marked does not mean you are shielded from difficulty. It means difficulty becomes purposeful. Challenges arrive with instruction embedded in them. Resistance is no longer random. Each obstacle carries information. Each delay asks for precision. This is why marked ones grow quickly, not because they avoid struggle, but because they extract meaning from it. Isolation, favor, and burden arrive together because they serve the same function. Focus. You are being narrowed, not diminished. Reduced, not restricted. The noise is being stripped away so what you carry can move without interference. The fewer the distractions, the clearer the signal you emit. And if you felt lately that your life is becoming simpler but heavier at the same time, fewer options, clearer direction, deeper responsibility. That is not a contradiction. That is what happens when you are marked. It is not the beginning of ease. It is the beginning of precision. Chosen one of the biggest misconceptions about being recognized, marked, or elevated is the belief that resistance disappears. It doesn't. What disappears is ineffective resistance. What replaces it is something far more subtle and far more revealing. Earlier in your journey, the pressure was loud, external, chaotic. Situations collapsed. People disappointed you. Circumstances blocked your progress. Those attacks were designed to destabilize you emotionally, to push you into reaction, bitterness, or self-doubt. And for a time, they worked. Not because you were weak, but because you were still learning how to regulate under fire. But once your inner state became more stable, those tactics lost their impact. You may have noticed this shift already. Things that once triggered you no longer have the same power. Certain people faded out of your life without confrontation. Old patterns stopped repeating. The chaos didn't disappear, it became irrelevant. And when resistance stops working externally, it adapts internally. This is where the attacks change. Instead of dramatic obstacles, the testing becomes psychological. Instead of pressure from the outside, the pressure moves inward. You may experience fatigue without obvious cause, a temptation to withdraw too much, subtle thoughts of superiority or saviorhood, a quiet questioning of whether the responsibility is worth it. These are not punishments. They are calibration tests. At this stage, the goal is no longer to break you. It's to refine you. Pride becomes a risk, not because you seek it, but because recognition quietly follows alignment. Burnout becomes a threat, not because you are weak, but because you carry more weight than before. Isolation can become unhealthy if it turns into disengagement instead of integration. This is why silence often replaces signs. Earlier, reassurance came through emotion, synchronicity, or confirmation. Now, the path becomes quieter. You're expected to move forward without constant feedback. This is not abandonment. It is trust. When guidance becomes less visible, it's because your internal compass is being activated. Here's the key truth. Protection does not mean absence of challenge. It means challenge without derailment. You are no longer being tested on whether you will collapse under pressure. You are being tested on whether you will remain humble, connected, and disciplined while carrying clarity. This is a far more advanced form of resistance, and far fewer people ever reach it. You might also notice that when something does go wrong now, it resolves faster. Emotional recovery is quicker. Lessons are clearer. What once took months to process now takes days, sometimes hours. This isn't because life is kinder. It's because you've become more coherent. And here's an important distinction. Earlier attacks tried to make you react. Current tests ask you to respond. Reaction is unconscious. Response is intentional. That difference defines maturity. So if you've been wondering why the struggle feels quieter but heavier, less chaotic but more personal, you're not regressing. You're advancing. The battlefield moved because you did. The measure of growth is not how little resistance you face, but how little resistance can move you. And at this stage of your journey, Very little still can. Chosen one. This is where everything comes together, and where many misunderstand their purpose. You were not shaped to convince people, correct them, or lead through explanation. Your assignment is quieter and, because of that, far more powerful. You are here to teach without preaching. Most influence in the world is loud. It persuades, argues, performs, and demands agreement. But the influence you carry operates differently. It doesn't push information outward. It stabilizes the space around you. People don't feel instructed by you. They feel regulated by you. And that distinction matters. Here's the truth. Human beings learn more from nervous systems than from words. When someone is around you, they feel less rushed, less defensive, less fragmented. They may not know why, but something in them settles. That is not charisma. That is coherence. Your internal alignment quietly gives others permission to access their own. This is why your presence often speaks louder than anything you could say. You teach by how you handle pressure without becoming sharp. You teach by how you listen without needing to fix. You teach by how you move forward without bitterness. And because this teaching is nonverbal, it bypasses resistance. People don't argue with what they feel. They feel it first, and only later do they understand it. This is also why your assignment doesn't look impressive on the surface. There may be no stage, no title, no obvious audience. In fact, the more public the role, the more diluted this kind of influence becomes. What you carry works best in proximity. In conversations, workplaces, families, and quiet moments where someone is on the edge of collapse and doesn't need advice, but stability. You are not here to save people. That distinction is critical. Saviorhood leads to exhaustion and ego. Your role is to model possibility, to show through lived consistency that peace under pressure is achievable, that integrity is survivable, that light does not require naivety. And here's something important to understand. People will project onto you. Some will idealize you. Others will resist you. A few will misunderstand you entirely. That is not your failure. It is the natural response to someone who operates without chaos. Stability disrupts patterns built on disorder. Not everyone will be ready for that. This is why boundaries matter now more than ever. Teaching without preaching requires restraint. You don't explain yourself to everyone. You don't offer insight where it isn't requested. You don't drain yourself trying to be understood. Your job is not to be accessible. It is to be authentic. Over time, something subtle happens. People begin to mirror you, not consciously, but behaviorally. They slow down. They regulate. They choose differently after being around you. And they often won't credit you for it. That's how you know it's working. Because real teaching leaves no dependency. You are not meant to be remembered for what you said. You are meant to be remembered for how people felt clearer, calmer, and more capable after crossing your path. Your life becomes the evidence that transformation does not require perfection, only consistency. So if you've wondered why your journey made you quieter instead of louder, simpler instead of flashier, more grounded instead of more certain, this is why. Your assignment isn't to announce the truth, it's to embody it. And in doing so, you remind others of something they forgot. Not by telling them who they are, but by showing them what's possible when someone finally lives in alignment with it.